So this is a story that I have never told in full on YouTube before. Well, I've told bits and pieces of it, but there is one big part of the night that I've kept a secret. And I've honestly never really told many people the big part of the last night that I drank, mostly out of fear of being seen as crazy or just fear of judgment in general. But I've decided recently to not live my life in fear of those things anymore. So here we go. March 1st, 2014 was like any other Saturday. I was home alone. My roommate wasn't home that day. I was getting ready for a close friend to come over so that we could pre-drink and go downtown. That was a normal thing that we would do. So around that time period, I appeared perfectly happy, and I was that day. On the inside, I struggled a lot with anxiety and depression and feelings of low self-worth. I was like, what am I going to do with my life? My life is going nowhere. It's only getting worse. What am I going to do? So those feelings were always happening on the inside, but on the outside, I was fine. At that time, I had absolutely no plans whatsoever to quit drinking. I didn't even really think it was that big of a thing. I mean, I knew it was a problem, but I didn't think that it was an actual problem that was holding me back. So I barely remember really anything from the time when my friend came over to the house and we were hanging out pre-drinking. I just remember it was like a normal, uneventful night. The only difference was that I didn't really take many pictures, or really any pictures at all. There was only one photo from that whole night that we went out, and it was one that my friend took. But just like every other time, most other times that I would go out, near the end of the night, I would start to get like a weird feeling wash over me, and I would start to change. I would feel very pent up, and like I had a lot of negative, intense energy inside, and I didn't know how to get it out. I think it was a mixture of anxiety, feeling like I'm worth nothing unless I was drinking because I didn't know who I was. So I would often feel like I wanted to break things or freak out, and like I didn't know what to do with all this crazy pent-up energy I had inside when I would get to that point of being drunk, and I would want to be destructive. But I also didn't like to make people feel uncomfortable. So it was like a weird balancing act that I was always doing when I would get to that bad drunk stage, which was happening more and more and more. So the night downtown with my friend and like other friends that we met up with, I don't know, and random strangers, who knows, I was very social. So after that night was over, it was around 3:30. So we would have got a cab from downtown. And I remember at this point forward, I remember everything. I remember I got a cab with my friend. She dropped me off the corner of Roby and Kennard, and she kept going all the way home. So I was alone. As soon as I got to the cab, I felt like, okay, now I'm free. Now I can like be as demented as I feel on the inside. So I got out of the cab and I walked the short distance to my apartment. And as soon as I got into my apartment, I really only had one thing in mind. I'll back up a little bit. For the months leading up to this point, I wasn't suicidal, but I had this want, and I used to say it. I used to say, I don't want to die, but I want to bleed out in a snowbank. And I meant that I wanted something big to happen to me where I didn't die, but I ended up in the hospital for a long time, and so that it would like wake me up to get out of this bad place I was in my life. So that was on my mind, and I wanted to make that a reality that night. So like I said earlier, my roommate wasn't home, and actually a few months prior to this, I had an event where I was home alone. I was in that headspace, and there was a very sharp object, and I did some damage to my body. And I kept it a secret. I always kept it a secret. But my roommate found out like the next day when she could see the evidence of it, and she's so great. She's like in the world of helping people and like mental health and stuff, which I'm so glad she is, because at the time in 2014, she understood. So she said, like, if you ever have these urges again, if you ever feel this way again, call me. No matter where I'm at, I'll come, and just reach out. And no one's ever said that. I mean, I'm sure people have probably said it before, but I knew they were just saying it. But for some reason, I felt like she was serious. And it was one of those things of, you know, like, I'd rather hear your story than attend your funeral type thing. So it was one of those. So that night, when I came into the apartment, and I did do some damage, but then I remembered that when she said, let me know. So I did, I texted her. I've never done that before in my whole life. I never reached out when I was in a crisis like that. But I did. And I remember, like, it was like she was suddenly all right at home. She was on the other side of the city with a friend of ours, so she brought him with her, and they just showed up at home. And now that I think about it, like, I don't know what would happen if I didn't text her. So she shows up with a friend of ours. She gets on the phone with either the mobile crisis team or 911. I think it was 911. And our friend, he came into the bathroom with me. And because I was in a zone where I was trying to find more weapons, or I was in a zone. I couldn't stop. So he had to, like, take my shoulders and, like, take my hands and pull my hands away from wherever I was digging. I was digging under the sink trying to find stuff, and so he would, like, physically force me to not. And he was calm, and he wasn't saying, I mean, I'm sure he was saying stuff, but I don't even really remember because I was so, like, in a zone. And so he stopped me from doing anything worse. So, and I knew that my roommate was on the phone with 911. I knew that, but I was like, whatever. I don't even know what I was thinking. And then all of a sudden there was a police officer in my apartment, and I had stopped trying to resist our friend. I had calmed down because the police officer was there. Like, I wasn't, like, freaking out or anything. And I remember feeling relieved. Like, okay, thank goodness there's someone here that could help. Not necessarily the police officer. I didn't feel like he could help me, but I felt like this is step one of something that's gonna help me. So, and I remember I was smoking. It's so weird to imagine myself smoking cigarettes, and I think I was still drinking because I think there was, like, vodka there or something. So I was smoking in the living room with this police officer standing in the middle of my living room. And, like, it was sort of a small place. I'll show some pictures here just so you get a visual. The police officer said, okay, do you want me to take you to the hospital? And I said, yes. Because I was like, okay, in my mind, I was like, okay, now I can go to the hospital. And I felt like I did need professional help. I did need to be watched that night. So I said, yeah, let's go. And I felt relieved, like I said, that, like, okay, finally, please commit me. Please. I wanted that. I needed something, or bad stuff was gonna happen. So we all get in the police car. So he drove us down to the hospital nearby, and he dropped us off in front of the emergency room. At this point, 4:30 or 5 in the morning, my roommate stays with me, and we go into the hospital, just the two of us, and I go to the triage nurse. The triage nurse is like, well, what brings you here? I told her what just happened. She said, all right, go wait in the waiting room. And I know triage nurses don't do this, but, like, I felt like maybe she should. She didn't look at the fresh wounds that I had. She didn't look at any of that. So we go wait in the waiting room. And at this point, I'm getting tired. I'm not really drunk anymore because I just went through that. Like, it's so intense to go through such an upheaval. So I was getting really tired. I was starting to lose my drunkenness, and it makes me even more tired. It was around 6. We waited there for like an hour. No one was helping me, and I was just sitting there. So anyway, I said to my roommate, I was like, okay, I'm so tired. Like, let's just go home. I can't wait any longer, because by the time the doctor would have came out and I would have told him I want a psych evaluation, I want, like, please help me, commit me. I need help. I felt like then it would be, I didn't know what would happen. Like, would they send me to rehab? Like, I didn't know. And I was just too tired to stick around and continue to wait. So for me in that moment, I said, okay, let's just go home. Don't worry, I'm not going to do anything. It's fine. And I meant it. I said that to my roommate. She said, okay, let's go. So I was like, screw this. And I walked to the same triage nurse again, just to let her know that when they call my name, I'm not going to be here. I've just been waiting for too long. I'm just gonna head home. Like, thank you. And she's like, okay, that was it. Let me leave. Even now, when I look back on it, I'm like, I guess, like, what are they gonna do? But at the same time, I'm like, man, like, they could have at least sort of shown, like, oh, wait, ma'am, like, don't kill yourself. You know what I mean? So we walked home. I was tired. I meant it. It was 6:30 in the morning. And so I was laying in bed and all my lights were off except for my window. My curtain was open a little bit, so the street light was shining in, so I could still sort of make out like shapes around my room. Not really, it was dark, and I knew the sun was gonna be up soon. Oh, I had that like gross gritty feeling, you know what I mean? Like all over your body. Oh, such a yucky feeling. But anyway, so back in these times, whenever I would have like a crazy night or something that I felt was monumental, I used to take photos or videos of myself to remember it, even though I would never show anybody, and I would just keep it for my own records. So I said, all right, well, we got to document. I'm really tired. I'm laying in bed. So I was fully clothed. I had my shirt on, but I like lifted my shirt up a little bit. Like, you know, I exposed some skin so I could, but still nothing racy. And I was just taking photos. So I had my camera up above me when I was laying in bed. And I was just taking pictures with the flash on just so I could document what I had done that night. I will not show the full picture because nobody will ever see the full pictures. But you can have an idea of what it looked like. So I was doing that, and more of like a way to remember, to tell myself, Leanne, this is getting worse. This is escalating. Look what you're doing. You got to stop doing this or you're going to die. So that was my way of trying to tell my sober self, stop doing this. Figure out a way. You got to figure out a way. I didn't know how. So in the midst of taking those photos, I suddenly felt like there was someone in my room, and I stop and I'm listening. I don't hear anything. But someone is in my room. I can feel it. And then but I know nobody's actually in there because like our apartment was small. I came home, everything was locked up. Like there was nowhere to hide if anyone were to break in. Nobody was actually in there. Before I went to, like, I could see my full room. I didn't even have an under my bed because my bed was stacked on like 30 milk crates, so you couldn't even go under my bed even if you wanted to. So I could see all around my room. Nobody was in there. So I knew it was safe in that way, but I still had that overwhelming feeling like someone was right in here watching me. You know that feeling, we've all had that. So I just got really quiet, and it wasn't going away. Like it was very strong. It filled my whole room. And so I had a camera with a flash on. So I'm like, have you guys done this too? You're like, oh, I want to capture a ghost on film, so I'll take a picture with the camera or with the flash on, and like maybe something will come up. A lot of the times you're catching dust and it looks like an orb. So anyway, so I was taking photos around my room trying to capture what I felt because it was so strong. It wasn't going away and nothing was coming up on the photos. I'll show you all the photos here. So I was taking pictures, nothing. I would zoom in on the photo and I would try to make something out, and like, oh, I see a bright light. What is that? Oh, it was just the flash reflecting off a piece of plastic. So nothing came up in the pictures, but I still had that really strong feeling that someone was in the room, but I wasn't scared. If I felt that way now, or really any time in my life, if I felt that way, that there was someone in my room, I'd be friggin' terrified. First off, if I was brave enough to move, to reach for my phone would be on. I would have the flashlight on, and I would investigate because I'd be so terrified. But I wasn't scared. I wasn't scared at all. It felt normal. It felt okay. I don't want to say that I felt safe and at peace. I don't want to say that because I don't think that's true. And I don't want to make up elements to the story to try to fill in the gaps, even if those elements sound nice. I don't want to do that, because it's not what I remember happening. And I want to only remember this story and tell the story of exactly what happened and how I felt and what I remembered. I don't want to add in little things like that might fill it out or might make it sound better. Not my style. So all I know is that I didn't feel scared, and it felt okay. It felt fine. It was overwhelming. And I said, all right, well, I'm going to go to sleep. And I went to sleep. And I had, it was around 7:30 by the time like I took all the pictures, had that weird experience, fell asleep, and woke up the next morning in the early afternoon. I was late for work. I was completely dazed when I woke up. And I remember seeing the time and that feeling that you get in the pit of your stomach when you're like, oh God, I'm late. But really I was like a couple hours late, and I felt so hungover, and I felt so emotionally, physically, spiritually, everything completely drained. And I felt very spacey in my head, and I felt very light in one way, but heavy in another. And I don't know if my mom was calling me or if she'd sent text and I didn't respond. So either way, I ended up calling my mom shortly after waking up. And I don't even remember what we talked about, but I remember that she said that I sounded weird. I sounded different, not in a good way. I sounded weird, like in my voice. And that freaked me out. Because like, it's one thing for you to feel weird in your own skin, but it's another thing for when other people notice it and then say it. But she was right. Like I was so weird. I felt like I wasn't speaking. I felt like I was detached from my body. It was very dissociative, is the best way to put it. I felt very detached from my body and my environment and my reality. I felt like I was a shell of a person who had faint memories and thoughts. And I would just be, sure, I was hungover, all that kind of stuff too, but it was something different. It was a terrible feeling. I still remember what that felt like. So I don't really remember what happened for the rest of the day, but I remember I would have got off the phone with mom. I would have went and made myself some food. I would have nursed myself back to health for the rest of the day because I didn't go to work. So I would have called in sick from work. So that would have been a Sunday afternoon. It was March 2nd, 2014. And I don't know what it was, but I was like, I am quitting drinking. What do I do? I'm quitting drinking. So one of the first things I did was I texted my ex because I knew she was sober and I knew she had a pretty big problem with it. But she was sober now and we didn't really talk anymore. That's one of the things that sort of happens. Like when you're in active addiction, you're like, oh, you're sober? Okay, cool. Not going to talk to you ever again. So I texted her and I said, what do? I got to get sober. And she said what helped her was AA. I didn't want to go to AA. That didn't sound like it was what I wanted to do, but I didn't know what else to do. Like what do? You get sober, you go to AA. That's part of our culture. It's part of our programming of what you do. I didn't know what else to do, but I know I needed help. I needed something. I need something quick. So that next day was my first AA meeting. And I don't go anymore, but I did go for the first year and it was tremendously helpful. And that Monday as well, I called the Nova Scotia Mental Health and Addiction Services to reach out and say, I need help. Can you help me? What can you do? And that's like the local resource here in Nova Scotia of, mental health and addiction services. That's where you go for like a step one of how they can help you. And so about that experience I had the last night that I drank, the experience of when I was in my room and I felt like when someone was in there, and then the next morning it's like there was a switch that flicked off in my head and a new switch that turned on. No, it was like a complete switch that happened in my head. And like for the first year of in recovery, I didn't really think about that night and that weird, very strong presence I felt. I haven't felt it since, by the way, not that intensely. I never really gave it much thought because I was so focused on recovery work and getting my life together. But I started to wonder, like, what was that? And the very few people I ever talked to about it, there's varying theories, and I even go back and forth. But like, so people have said, oh, it's your guardian angel. Like, oh, it was an angel. It was God. It was the universe. It was a ghost. It was one of your ancestors. So many different interpretations of what that could have been. And what do I think it was? I don't know. Like, first of all, it was something. I truly believe that it was something. It's funny, like I'll be on either end of the spectrum. So one end of the spectrum would be, it was a neurological event. It was such a heavy night that when I was going to sleep and alcohol was leaving my system, something in my brain happened, and some neurons did some weird firing and made me have a sensation that someone was in the room watching me, and then I interpreted that as someone was in the room watching me. But I'm like, how come it's never happened before? I was in traumatic situations before and that I never had that feeling. What? I don't know. So anyway, there's that one end of it. And then the other end of it is like, well, it was a guardian angel. It was an ancestor. It was God himself in my room. I don't know. And I'm sure you can see why I didn't want to share this story for a long time, because there's so many things that people could say. But what I've learned in my life is that you are your own person. You have your own experiences. You interpret things your own way through the lens of your life that is built by your past experiences and your beliefs and your values, and all that kind of stuff gets all wrapped up into your perception, and things happen to you and they are yours, no one else's. Literally, they're only yours, your experiences. No one else was there. No one else is in your brain and in your eyes and in your past to see, to experience what you experience. So what they say about it doesn't really hold that much weight because it's yours. Experiences are yours. So that experience that happened that night was mine. No one else was there. I know what I felt. I know that even though I never had thoughts of quitting drinking, I know that after I had that experience, I quit forever. It's been 7 years. I'm still going to go on. I can't see myself ever drinking again. And it was bad before that. For some reason, I don't know. Whatever was in my room didn't magically make me sober and like turn my life around and all that stuff. That's not what happened. What happened was something in my brain switched and I suddenly had motivation and drive and a determination to live. Because before that I didn't, and I did. So I ran with it. I think I'm lucky in that way, where it was such a rock bottom that it was easy for me to remember how bad it got if I relapsed. So that's makes things easy when you're going through recovery work. Recovery was still very, very hard. I still had so many triggers and so much stuff to work through. And I cried a lot in the first year. I cried a lot in the second year. I thought I was destined to relapse. I thought I was destined to always feel chaos in my brain because that didn't go away. Things weren't magically different when I got sober. They got a lot better, but there was still so much work I had to do on the inside. And now that I am over 7 years, I still have a lot of work that I got to do. But the one thing that I'm the most grateful for is that I'm sober and clear-headed when I do it. If I was still drinking and trying to work on myself at the same time, it just wouldn't have worked. It just doesn't work because drinking was self-destructive. Drinking was an escape. Drinking was a coping mechanism. I had to remove that to be completely naked and work on myself from the ground up. That's it. We're all humans. We're all humans on this planet for a small amount of time. All you can do is be your completely authentic self and say, I don't care what you think, boy I went to elementary school with. I don't care what you think, Debbie in accounting. This is my life. This is my story. These are things that I went through. And why I tell them is to show other people who are going through similar things that you are not alone, that you can also get through it, because you truly can. And so if you are going through the recovery process, or even if you're thinking about quitting, or if you're like in sort of the same state that I was in, or you don't really know what to do, you feel like you're lost and all that kind of stuff, just know that it seriously does get better. So I hope you enjoyed this video as much as you could. Hope you found it entertaining. And I don't really want to say this, but I really want to know, what do you think that was? I'm so curious, like what other people think about it. Like what do you think that was? I don't know. Do you think it was just like some weird part of my brain doing brain stuff? Or do you think it was actually something like a divine intervention? Let me know. And if you want to say something negative, just know that it's not going to affect me, but it could affect somebody reading your comment. So think twice before you, I don't know, try to put somebody down, because you could do more damage, and not to me. So remember, you can do hard things, you deserve happiness, and you are loved.
What are you doing? What are you looking at? What are you looking at?